Lord, help us.
Thank you, Secretary Becerra. I want to start with your attention here on this jar. Do you see this? Do you know what this is?
Looks like candies or snacks.
Unfortunately, the reality is much more grim. These are wristbands that the cartels force people to wear when they cross the border. And if you're not wearing one and you cross the border, the cartels will take a limb or an appendage. This is what these people are forced to wear, and it dictates what cartel they belong to, how much they have paid. And they are absolutely a part of the horrors of trafficking and smuggling that occurs at our southwest border. And I have to point this out because I want to tell the journey, because this has really been laid out in bits and pieces along the way by my colleagues, and we're here to talk about these kids. So if you could turn your attention to the screen real fast, I want to show a quick photo that I took. It was 11:46 at night. I myself took this photo. That little girl that you see was acting terrified, not of the agents, not of myself, but of the man holding her. The very next day at the Donna Processing Facility, we threatened, and I was there to witness this man with a DNA test. He confessed that he actually was not her father, that he had rented her. This is a process called recycling. Now, I know we're here to talk about what happens to these kids after this point, but this little girl was then turned over to HHS custody, your custody, and you've talked at length today about the vetting process, right? And so you now know that this little girl, not through a DNA test, she's not related to that man. She now is in your custody. You have your own case managers who are supposed to vet these processes. And we, of course, know this from the Florida grand jury. These case managers have very little training or no training in interviewing these individuals, particularly children and young children who have been traumatized. You can imagine this man who you just saw on the screen, who, by the way, was a convicted sex offender with this child. You can imagine the trauma that that child had sustained. Your own case managers are not trained in examining, evaluating, or recognizing documents as authentic or fake. She came with no documents. They have no official training when it comes to trauma-informed interviewing skills, no official training when it comes to investigating the safety or legitimacy of addresses to which a UAC may be sent. Now, I don't know what happened to that little girl, but what I do know is that the sponsors that you claim to thoroughly vet, which I would love to get your definition of thorough, because you haven't been able to articulate that here today. It also would include the fact that these kids show up with numbers pinned to their clothes or Sharpied on their bodies to call. Agents have reported in official testimony that these kids have the numbers, the same phone number Sharpied on their arms time and time again. Now, we've heard, of course, of situations where the same sponsor is being called, and magically 20, 30, 40 kids end up with that sponsor. And again, I go back to your statement of we thoroughly vet. You've really emphasized that. Do you vet every member of the household? And does it include an FBI check? Does it include an Interpol check? I would hope that it would, considering that we've had 151 different nationalities cross the southwest border under the Biden administration. But I'm guessing that it doesn't, because only 9% of the UACs are subjected to a DNA test with their sponsor, less than 23% to a background check. And again, I should point out for the record the fact that you release these folks, these kids, to sponsors that are in the country illegally. By definition, they have already broken the law. Is it a standard operating policy to release children into the hands of sponsors in households that haven't been properly vetted and that are here in the country illegally?
I think I heard a question there, and so I'll try to respond because you packed a lot in there, a lot which I think has a lot of misinformation and that I disagree with. I could first start by saying that we do go through a thorough process on assessment of the child when the child first comes to our attention. So that
what
little
is your
girl,
I'm sorry, I'm going to reclaim my time. Secretary, what is your definition of thorough?
I mentioned it in a previous
Does it include
response.
a DNA test?
an assessment of the child's
No, that is not my
situation.
question. My question is, does it include a DNA test, yes or no?
DNA is one of the tools that we use on occasion.
In only 9% of the cases. Does it
It is
include a
tool that
background
we
check?
use. We do a number of things to go through a series of tests and assessments of a child when we get them. We do
And a
the same
background
type
check
of
in
vetting.
only 23% of the cases? And the DNA, by the way, that you rely on in your ORR case managers, if you could please pull up Exhibit 2. This shows that the DNA requirements that you rely on in the case files, I realize this is a CBP document, but this memo is something that is really important for what we're talking about because so much of the case files that your case managers rely on in vetting these thorough checks, they've suspended the DNA requirement. I'm out of time. I know you want to answer the question anyway and deviate from your carefully crafted talking points, but I think this is disgusting that 85,000 children are missing and it's on your watch. With that, I yield
Kenley
back.
yields